It's amazing what you can find buried in a single document, right? Like this criminal complaint you sent over, it's like you pull on one thread and bam, a whole other layer of this story starts to unravel.
Oh, absolutely.
So today, that thread we're tugging on is any mention we can find of Wack 100.
Right.
To see if we can shed some light on this whole indictment. Now listen, we're not about jumping to conclusions or going beyond what's right here in front of us, but every single time his name pops up, we got to analyze it. What's the context? What does it tell us about his potential role, if any, in this whole mess?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. We've got a very specific task here. We are looking at how Wack 100 figures into this case against Eugene Henley Jr. and the others named in this document. And that's it. We're drawing a line right there.
Right.
We're not speculating beyond the information provided in this criminal complaint. We're sticking to what we have. So we're going to be analyzing the nature of his appearances in this document and what they might imply about his responsibility or even his potential involvement in the alleged criminal activities.
Okay. So first mention of Wack 100 that we stumbled across relates to this robbery back on July 5th, 2021.
Okay.
Now, this went down at a marijuana dispensary where someone identified as Victim 1 worked.
Okay.
And the complaint dives into how Victim 1, it seems, had been extorted for years by the Big U enterprise, but then something changed. They stopped making those payments.
Right.
And it looks like this robbery was a direct response to that.
Yeah, it seems that way. The complaint states that it was a large group of Big U enterprise members that participated in this robbery. And they got away with a pretty substantial amount of cash and marijuana.
Yeah.
But here's where things take a very interesting turn during this armed robbery. Victim 1 ends up speaking with Henley himself on the phone.
Wait, really? During the robbery? That's wild.
Yeah, and it gets even weirder because Henley invites Victim 1 to his house a little while later and proceeds to return a portion of the stolen money.
No way. That's insane. It's like a robbery followed by an act of generosity. Like, what is going on?
It's definitely not your typical robbery scenario, and this strange turn of events brings us to the next piece of this puzzle. One of the individuals involved in that robbery, a guy named Williams, who we learn is Henley's self-proclaimed right-hand man, later spoke about this whole thing on the No Jumper podcast.
Okay.
Now, he corroborated Victim 1's account of showing up at Henley's place while they were all counting the loot, and he confirmed that Henley did indeed decide to return about $40,000.
Wow. Okay, so this is where Wack 100 makes his entrance, right?
Right.
Because according to the complaint, he was also on that No Jumper episode.
That's right. And what's interesting is the complaint points out that he's a figure within the Bloods,
right,
who are often considered rivals to the groups Henley is associated with.
Yeah.
So he's providing a bit of an outside perspective.
Absolutely. And the complaint actually quotes Wack 100 directly. It says, he said this, and I quote, "You know why he wanted to give the dude back the $40, right? Because he was going to make the dude give him $20 for getting it back."
It's a cynical take, but potentially insightful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it casts a whole new light on Henley's actions.
It's crazy, right? It completely changes how you see that whole thing. Henley returning the money, it wasn't out of the goodness of his heart. Like, it's like, oh no, he's playing some kind of long game here.
It really throws a wrench into this idea of Henley being the good guy, you know? And the fact that this perspective is coming from a rival figure from a different gang, it really says a lot about the dynamics at play here.
Oh yeah, it's like in that world, nothing is what it seems like. You can't just take things at face value.
It suggests this underlying current where everything is transactional, where seemingly altruistic acts might actually have hidden agendas.
Absolutely.
It's a perspective likely informed by the complex history and interactions between these groups.
Makes you think. And the fallout from this No Jumper podcast episode, that's pretty telling too.
Oh yeah, how so?
So the complaint states that rapper RR actually did end up delivering that $50,000 in one of the alleged incidents that Williams talked about. But then guess what?
What?
Henley cuts off all communication with Williams and doesn't share any of the money.
Wow.
Henley hit No Jumper with a cease and desist order to try and get that episode taken down.
Oh, really?
Now, a recording's still out there online, but that reaction from Henley, it kind of tells you he didn't want that story getting out.
He definitely seems sensitive about it. So let's circle back to Wack 100's statement.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that based on this document, at least he was not directly involved in the robbery itself.
Right.
His role, as it's presented here, is that of an outsider looking in, offering his take on Henley's motivations.
Exactly. It's like he's giving color commentary on his rival's actions from afar. But again, just to be crystal clear, based on what we've got here in this complaint, it doesn't look like Wack 100 was actually involved in the crimes listed in this indictment.
Agreed, but let's just make absolutely sure we haven't missed anything.
Okay.
Does his name come up anywhere else in this criminal complaint in relation to any of the other alleged crimes, like you mentioned, the murder?
Yeah.
The other extortion claims any fraud stuff we need to be thorough here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So besides that whole no jumper thing, any other connections or interactions between Wack 100 and Henley or any of the other people named in this indictment?
Well, when you really comb through this document, there are a couple more instances where Wack 100's name does pop up.
Okay.
Most notably, there's a part where Henley allegedly threatened to beat the shit out of someone called Witness 2.
Yeah.
Because he thought Witness 2 was starting shit between Henley and Wack 100.
Interesting. So not exactly buddies, then more like adversaries.
It paints a picture of conflict, maybe even animosity between the two. And there's another part that mentions Henley bragging to Victim 1 about an incident where he and members of the Rollin' 60s, another gang, supposedly chased down Wack 100.
Really?
So again, this reinforces this idea of a tense, potentially violent relationship between Henley and Wack 100.
Okay.
Which further suggests Wack 100's not part of Henley's alleged criminal enterprise, at least based on what we're seeing here.
So putting all these pieces together, the podcast commentary, the threat against Witness 2, and now this alleged chase, it seems like Wack 100's involvement in this whole thing is more about him being talked about by Henley.
Right.
And then him kind of offering his perspective on things from the outside looking in.
That's a solid summary based solely on this criminal complaint. Wack 100's role seems to be that of an observer, a commentator, and even someone who is targeted by Henley.
But not someone actually taking part in the crimes themselves.
Exactly.
So for you listening at home, the key takeaway here is this Wack 100 is definitely mentioned in this criminal complaint. The picture it paints of him is as this external figure. He's commenting on things. He's even a target of some of the individuals involved, but he's not directly participating in the criminal activities that this document outlines.
Precisely. And it's crucial to remember that our analysis here is limited to this one document. There could be other information, other documents, other perspectives that could tell a completely different story.
And that brings us to a pretty thought-provoking question for all of you listening out there. We've seen that Wack 100 is painted as a rival to Henley in this complaint, but he also seems to have some insider knowledge of Henley's alleged methods.
Yeah.
So what does that tell us about how things work in this world?
That's a good question.
Like, how does information travel between these rival factions? And what does it mean that even someone who's seemingly on the opposite side can have these insights into how things operate?
Yeah, it really highlights how interconnected these groups can be even when they're rivals. It makes you think about reputations, how patterns of behavior become known, and how information spreads and gets interpreted within these circles. It also raises the question of how valuable these external perspectives can be, even if they might be biased.
Definitely food for thought.
Yeah, it encourages us all to think critically and to keep digging for more information. There might be other pieces of the puzzle out there just waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely. All right, folks, keep those questions coming. And as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.